guys, we're gonna wait for the clarity to clear up a little bit. Wait for a couple people to join, and then we'll get started. It's always kind of really fuzzy.
Yeah, in the beginning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining, guys. Just come on in and sit tight. We're gonna get started in about 2 seconds. We'll get started. Thank you guys for joining us for another Meet the Media Mondays. This is my summer series that I've just coined myself.
Love it.
Thank you so much. I really just have a passion of trying to show you guys the people, or the industry gatekeepers, you know, the people behind the scenes. These are people that I pride myself to have on my media list. So instead of just having an email, I definitely suggest that we build relationships. That's a lot about what I've been talking about. So on that relationship building, I wanted to bring to you guys Micha Green. I guess friends, personal, close people have the pleasure of calling you Mimi.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I always introduce myself as Micha, but sort of years ago, Mimi, all my family called me Mimi, and years ago, I made my Facebook Mimi, you know, as you're applying to colleges. That was so long ago, I'm not saying. However, it's stuck. Mm-hmm. And my background was actually in acting first. Okay. I majored in theater, and my agent said there's another Micha Green in the, I believe she's in the Screen Actors Guild. And so I was like, okay, well, what do you suggest? And she's like, what about Mimi? So
that's really
cute. Sort of for equity reasons and things like that, my name is now Micha Mimi Green.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I was just learning, like, Portia de Rossi, her name is something random, like Amber, you know what I mean? Not to say that's it exactly, but it's funny how you have to, you know, brand yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting that you did that way back. So what made you transition from acting into the news, journalism?
So it's funny. I went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts. I'm from DC.
Okay.
And when I was a student there, we were doing a lot of work that required research into our acting. I also, through the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program, worked at the Smithsonian for 2 years at the National Portrait Gallery. And we were doing, again, research to bring these characters to life. So I always really found a love in researching. And don't get me wrong, research is required for any character that you're bringing to life, whether it's a fictional character or not. But having to play these real characters really got me interested in how we have archival information about them, and that was obviously through journalism. So I was always really interested in it, and I minored in communications. My parents actually always wanted me to do broadcast journalism. One of my gigs when I was actually still in high school just required me to sort of serve as an anchor and read from a teleprompter in an educational video. And so they had always wanted me to do broadcast journalism. It was, you know, sort of safer at making money, although we'll get to that in a second. And they thought I was great at it. I instead did theater and loved it, but really fell in love with communications even further when I minored in it. It was just impossible. I went to Fordham, which is a really, really wonderful but hard theater program, so it was impossible for me to double major in journalism with the requirements. That's sort of how I started. And then I went to an audition. I worked as a professional actress, and I went to an audition where they required me to read a teleprompter again, and that was it. And they gave me $500 on the spot. And I was like, oh my gosh, if this is journalism, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And so I applied it to a couple universities and ended up getting my master's from University of Maryland, Philip Merrill College of Journalism, which is a great program. I suggest it to anyone who's interested in journalism, or sort of even if you are publicists but want to know what we're doing. Yeah. There's classes and things like that. I would absolutely suggest Maryland. There's a huge Maryland mafia in this area. But anyway, and so I I majored in broadcast journalism. While I was there, we had to, of course, write articles, and we had to print them professionally I think it was like 5 or 10 per semester. And so, I wasn't interested in doing print journalism, but I had to. And so I reached out to the Afro. That was in 2015. And so I freelanced for the Afro from 2015 on to January of 2018. And freelanced other places and did broadcasts and things like that, and ended up getting the offer to be DC editor of the Afro.
Wow. What an honor.
Yeah.
That's not like a little time thing. That's a big deal.
It was huge. So, of course, I couldn't say no. And I'm here.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, going back to, you mentioned something. You was like, we'll touch on that later.
Oh, money. Yeah. So, well, really for me, more than anything is I sort of I've had a different way of going into journalism. When I first started, all I wanted to do was entertainment. And so I very much so focused on that when I was at Maryland. I did other things, of course, and had to do breaking news and had to do long form pieces and things like that. I mean, I did politics, all of that. But I really focused on entertainment journalism. I think in retrospect, I would have done more just because I think I'm a really strong reel, but a lot of it is sort of feature stories and things like that. And so really busting into the broadcast world has been difficult for me. I did an intern at a broadcast station because I had a finite amount of time in my full ride. At University of Maryland, I had too many loans at Fordham, and so for reasons for me not staying as long in grad school and sort of I did a very truncated version of grad school, which was great, but it was hard, and so because I had a finite amount of time, I really just focused on what I wanted to do. And so it was great in one ways, but a little bit, I think, hindering in others just because I wasn't able to get internships and things like that with the amount of time I had to graduate. And in doing so, it was, like I said, it's been difficult. And so many of the positions I've been offered would not allow me to live at all as a broadcast journalist. And these are even in markets where, the cost of living is not as much. But it still would have been difficult. And a lot of people, said, it's okay, go for it, and the money will come and things like that. And I considered it. For me, at the time, I was offered a broadcast position in a market that, it would have been very difficult for me to survive. And it was in a very rural part of West Virginia, right at a time where the country really was in turmoil and things like that, and it just was not enough. I didn't have a car then. I would have had to drive. There was no way for me to work. Yeah. And around that time, I got this position with the Afro. Had my car, was able to get a car, and trust me, I am not at all bawling, but it was more than what I would have been making there. Yeah. And at the same time, this position has given me a lot of flexibility, latitude to do broadcasts, to do print, to bring my skills and create new projects for a 127-year-old paper. And so basically, my thought is it is difficult to make a living that you can survive, within this field, but it's so worth it if you really pick and choose how you're doing it. I have a lot of friends who are freelancers and make more money than me just because, they treat the publications that they work for like their clients. And I think that's really important, is that they're the boss of their journey. And so that's, because of that, they know how much money they're making, and they know it doesn't make sense for me to do this article because I can make $1,500 here, or it doesn't make sense for me to do this package or interview this person because I can do it here for this much, and they really are bosses of their own journey. And again, that's just been something that I've learned to balance, because I work for a wonderful publication. We don't do it for the money, for sure. But I'm glad I took my time and did not do the broadcast position. That would have been $20,000 a year. $20,000. I mean, just I don't know who can live on that. And got this, awesome opportunity to tell the stories of my people.
That's amazing that you would just step out on faith and choose not to do what you really thought or foresaw as your, intended path.
Yeah, I mean, I still, wonder if it was the right decision, but I definitely think it is, particularly because I've had so many opportunities to broadcast since being here. I mean, I've done a lot with stations in the area, regular appearances, same with radio, and then I've created TV shows and series with the Afro. When I started, I was doing Facebook Live for them, so really trying to, even take that up a notch and really bring the broadcast digital world further into the Afro. I mean, they were already doing it when I got there, but for a 127-year-old newspaper to be interested in taking it to the next level and say, yeah, we're going to keep the paper, we're going to keep it alive, but we have to do other things. And, I'm so happy that they embraced the energy that I brought with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So just to go back really quick, when you were talking about having kind of like a foundation in journalism, even if you do public relations, so that's something that I talk about all the time coming from Penn State. That was like a requirement. And I think that it was necessary because need to know how to write. I need to know AP style in order to communicate with my editors, with my producers. So to you, how essential do you think, the ethics of journalism and that, knowing how to write stories, even for someone in my profession?
It's so important. I mean, I work best with publicists who are able to speak my language. It just makes it easier. I mean, trust me, there have been times where we would take the press release, that quote from the press release that you did, and send her statement sent from so-and-so's publicist or whatever, and just not having that extra comma, is really important because that takes the time. And so it's so important, I think, that a publicist has a background in journalism. My mom did PR for years, and she is still one of my best editors to this day because she knows, the errors that we as editors look for. She is so incredibly inspiring to me and helps give wisdom when I'm talking to a publicist or whatever. And what's also so amazing is that those relationships that we form last a lifetime. One of the publicists who worked with my mom back in the early 90s with Marion Barry, they both worked for Marion Barry at the time, is now one of the publicists looking out for me as I explore the world of journalism. And she saw me, I was a kid, I was a baby when my mom worked for Marion Barry, but she saw me, thought I looked familiar, and then realized I looked just like my mom, and has really looked out for me ever since. And so I think it's so important. But the other reason why I think journalism is just a great foundation for publicists is because it gives them an opportunity to further their world. Some of the best publicists I know have worked as journalists, freelance as journalists regularly, look at what you're doing. This being able to ask the questions, being able to ask your clients the questions that the journalists will need answered.
Absolutely.
All of those are so important. And obviously, I think you're a hotter commodity if you know how to do both, if you know how both worlds work, and it has to make it easier, I'm sure, in your world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I wonder, and it's so much competition in my world. Everyone says that they do PR, and it's like, I grind my teeth because I had to have a certain GPA in order to even declare my major. And back at the time, it was so competitive to even get into public relations, so I take it super serious.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering on the editing side, can you tell? Is it a joke? You know what I mean? Just when the copy comes through, they're self-taught.
Oh yeah, I can always tell when they're self-taught every single time. And honestly, times where I wonder, should I take this based off the release I've gotten? And I've done it anyway, to be honest. You know, when I think it's not as professional, the client hasn't been as professional. And that it just makes it sort of difficult. And obviously, I want to tell the story honestly and not based off of the publicist's poorly written press release or the client, you know, really not giving me what I need in answers no matter how I'm pulling and changing the question up or whatever. I'm going to still tell a fair story. But for me to have in the back of my head, well, what's wrong with that person? And it just seemed like they don't really know what they're doing. It's sort of difficult for me to say yes next time when they want me to do another story for them.
Yeah, it's such a struggle for me in getting clients because a lot of people think that they can just do it for themselves, and it's like, oh, I wish. But unfortunately, a lot of startups might not have the budget, you know, for my services. But I like to think that, you know, it's always best to have that professional representation.
It is, you know, it really makes a difference in the long run. I have totally told a lot of my friends, of course, are artists, singers, actors, and things like that, who have had to hire, you know, some sort of PR firm or a publicist, just in order to have someone speaking on their behalf. You know, I've told them it is so important to have someone else in your corner as an advocate. And yes, you're paying them, but then if you're paying them, they're going to do good work, you know. And I get why people don't think, you know, they think that they can just have a firm write a press release or they can do their own press release and it be done. But in the long run, again, people just will respect you more. And again, I perk up when I see a well-written press release, when I perk up when I see someone who knows how to communicate with me, who follows up, who's timely. All those things are so important to me because my life is absolutely insane. And I'm normally have 5 to 10 stories in my head at once. And so anyone who I can work with, that it makes it easier for me. And, you know, even if it's just an online relationship, that's so important. Because there's a sense of comfort, there's a sense of, oh, I can remember you, and I know that the things that you're going to bring to me will be a great story to tell.
Absolutely, and I'm always telling my clients, you guys don't have to publish my stories, but that's why I make it apparent to every day try to find like 1 or 2 different contacts to add to my media list and really stroke those contacts, you know, not just being an email, really, you know, being a name.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much that like really means to people in your line of work or, you know, holding the keys, you know, really just having relationships. Like, you know, you don't have to tell our stories.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing. It definitely, there are times where I do pieces because of the relationship that I've built with the person. And, you know, I think that it's really, going back to your question before about why publicists really should understand journalism and the ethics of journalism and things like that is just because we've become cool. No, I'm not going to do every piece, you know.
Right.
And that's the thing.
Can you?
Exactly.
Right.
You know, it still has to be professional. And so, you know, and for me, I'm very much curious about the ethics of journalism, you know. Not taking gifts, all of those things I think are also really important. And knowing that, you know, you're put in an awkward position when someone has offered you something further and things like that because you're doing a story, you know, those things are really important on both ends. But I think building a relationship and having a relationship with a publicist and a journalist is so important. It you know, cements things, I think, for a very long time, and particularly, you know, I know people like Dr. Sheila Brooks and Jennifer Connelly. They are renowned journalists, you know, who have now gone into the world and really made a difference in public relations. You know, Dr. Brooks is with major clients now, and some of those people she met when she was reporting, saying. And again, she did the work. She was going back and went to school and studied the business side of it and studied, you know, marketing and working in PR and things like that. Jennifer Donnelly, I believe, who's now with the spokesperson for Prince George's police department. Like, that was not, you know, just because she's a journalist. She obviously had to put in the work and build those relationships and public relationships. I don't know her personally, but I see the way that she was able to do her job. That shows me you know, she knows what she's doing. She's putting the work on both sides.
That's amazing. So just something for fun. Having a background in journalism, I feel like has made me a snob. I say that because Facebook in particular drives me crazy. So I want to know if that does the same for you. If that's like your pet peeve, the there, and there, or the your and your, like it drives me nuts. I'm always critiquing.
Yeah, I mean, it on a daily basis, I have a shady Facebook or
comment?
No, that I want to, that I hold myself back from. I mean, I hate typos. I hated typos even before I was in journalism. I even, you know, now Facebook drives me crazy because it has the memories. And so, like, I'll look at myself when I was like 16 and be like, what was I talking about? But looking at other people's, I always want to correct it because I know people know what I do. Then I don't want to come off as a know-it-all. It's snobby, and so I don't do it unless we're really. I mean, it's been like my cousins where I've had to hold back, and I'm super close to my cousins. But even like I'm just like I don't want to be that person.
But don't they want to know the difference?
They do, and I think how it has to be done when I've done it has been like via text or a direct message, just because commenting below makes it worse.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so funny.
And then people like click, you know, I know what I would do, like then I click on the page and then, you know, people that I don't know, and they're like, oh, she's a journalist, like she's just a know-it-all. But it drives me crazy. But what drives me even, you know, I think further out of my mind is, it's a great thing, but a trying thing is that everyone really is a journalist now. Everyone can say a fact or say something that's not a fact, and people take it as fact. And so that really drives me crazy. The other part of it is people will share articles from like 2014 like it's brand new. I mean, okay, this is really stretched because obviously everyone knew this, but okay, June, I can't say the date because I don't remember, but June 2019, right? We would get an article about Michael Jackson's passing, even though it was 10 years ago. And it's like, rest in peace to the king. Now, obviously, Michael Jackson I've not seen. I've seen other, you know, the Maya Angelou's and all of them that were like big deaths, and people are posting it like it just happened. And what's even crazier is other people are commenting rest in peace. And it's like, where were you 5 years ago or 3 years ago when did you open the article and see that had a 2014?
No, they don't click.
You know, they don't.
Face value.
It's just face value. So that is most concerning to me, is that people aren't actually, you know, doing the job of readers. You know, back in the day, we knew that the paper was new and new news because you got it every day or got it once a week or whatever. But because so much information is flowing to us, that is very concerning to me. And the other thing is because we can go like this for news, is that we trust whatever's on our timeline and we don't really expand ourselves. I mean, as much as it drives me crazy to read some of like the conservative news and things like that, I do because I want to know what's coming out from this side and that side. And I mean, just as much as it drives me crazy to read the super liberal, you know, but it for me, it's being able to expand everything, know all of the facts that are being presented, know all of the information that is being fed to the world. It really, really is so important. And so that's more of my critique of social media. I love it. I am addicted to Instagram. I think a lot of people in my world like Twitter because Twitter, you know, at least, you know, you can do sort of a good job at weeding out some of the crappy information and follow. But again, you're only following people that like you want information from, unless you make a point of really expanding your horizon and doing so. And so Twitter sort of is normally journalism friendly. But I mean, I love it, but I see all of the issues in social media in terms of the work that I live into.
Yeah. That's so cool that you would say that. I can definitely relate. So you said that you love Instagram. What's something that me personally I love? Like I can take a hashtag and just go down the trail for miles. So like, what is a tool that you may use from social media? Hashtags
I use regularly, actually. I particularly And Publicists, please remember this. Send pictures with your clients, please.
Well, what if you don't want attachments? I came up in the age where you don't send attachments. You know, if you want to attach a press release, you still put it in the body.
That is fine. It doesn't need to be with the press release, but once you've agreed to do the story,
okay.
I need photos,
okay.
particularly for me because I live in the print world as well, and we do a lot. All of our articles go online too, but we want pictures with our stories.
Mm-hmm.
So particularly if you're working with, I think print and online reporters, make sure that you can provide a picture. But anyway, so
that's a good tip.
yeah. But anyway, so I love hashtags because that's generally how. If I don't have a picture, that's how I find my stuff. In the same way, you know, it might not be anything particular, but for example, like often for Memorial Day, I didn't have a really strong front for Prince George's County, for our Prince George's County section for Memorial Day. And so like I just looked up like hashtag Prince George's Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what was going to come out. And there was a beautiful sort of artistic installment at the National Harbor with flags for Memorial Day, which worked perfectly. And I found that solely through a hashtag. So I rely on hashtags probably more than anything. Same with find news. I mean, obviously I rely on people who send me pitches on an everyday basis, but I often look up, you know, particularly in these months when things are slowing down with councils and when things are slowing down with, you know, obviously we don't have a lot of school stories these days, except we do. But I find it through hashtags, a lot of it. And so one, hashtag your things, even if you don't think it's important, it totally is. I have been reached out for professional opportunities solely through my hashtags on Instagram. I'm a hashtag queen. And I mean, it's shameless. I don't mind. And, you know, I look at people. Beyonce doesn't even do captions. Like, one day I want to get to that level. When I just post and that's it, sure. But in the meantime, in between time, hashtags are my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody who wants any sort of recognition, no matter what you do. You're an event planner, please use hashtags. If you are a stylist, use those hashtags because we find you. We totally find you through the hashtags.
Thanks for saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that was really powerful. I know you're talking about how busy you are, and I definitely want to go to that, but a little bit later. I definitely want to get into the newsroom a little bit, if you can kind of tell us. You're talking about looking for stories. How often do you look for your own stories versus, you know, using your press releases for a story?
It's a little bit of a mix. I'd say maybe 70% of my stuff is based off of a press release or some sort of information that I've just received from an organization or a publicist really quickly. I'd say about 70%. And then I'd say at least about 20% of my work is me researching, and then the last 10% of pitches from my reporters.
Okay.
And was that right? Yeah, that was right, math.
Yes.
Yes. But anyway, and so, and that's really because of the fact, again, that changes throughout the year. Right now we're in slower months, and so a lot of it is me finding a lot more than I would say than in, for example, November through March tend to be like the hottest, even May, until school gets out, around the time that school gets out. Those are really, really hot months for journalism for whatever reason. Obviously, people are doing special events during the holidays and things like that, and just things speed up in a crazy way. And around June it slows down. So about 20% of my time is spent, I would say, looking for stories. And some of that comes just from when I wake up in the morning and I go on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Trending topics. I find a lot of my stuff that way. And you know, I think some of it has become sort of how I've begun to run my ship. It was very different than I had about 50% was pitches from my journalists, 20% I'd say came from Publicists, and in the last 30, right, 50, 20, yeah, 30 would have been me finding things, and that changed because the Afro sort of went through a time in which we weren't using as many freelancers, and so I really began to rely heavily on the stuff that Publicists were sending me, and I think also it sort of became a part of me understanding the importance of these PR people in my life. I had to really read the stuff that I was getting thoroughly, and not just say, okay, this looks like a cute event, and forward it to someone. I was doing a lot of the stuff, when I didn't have 30 people pitching stories to me a week. It became harder, and so I really relied and understood why I needed these publicists in my life. Also, he's now retired, but it's still with us, the former general manager of the DC office at the Brookings, he's in Beepers, which for those that don't know is the Black Public Relations Alliance or something like that. But but he's in Beepers and really sort of became inundated in the PR world, even though he was working for the news. And he's I don't know how old he is, but he is definitely he's retirement age. And he is known as Mr. DC no matter where he goes, and I think for the past 35 years he's been doing that. And so he really sort of, again, I came from, my mom was a publicist, but to go into a world where, I wanted to be the journalist. I wanted to find the stuff. I didn't really want to rely on that. And then he was like, no, get to know these people, read these press releases. And so that sort of also helped me know I can rely heavily. They're here to help me. This is their job, and not only are they here to help me, but they are sort of the first storytellers. And so read what they have to offer you, and it's been life changing for me, for sure.
That's such a fresh approach, because I'm always, I guess, I'm afraid. I only want to contact certain editors with I would never give you any BS. You know what I mean? It's like, if I have a certain contact, I only want to send you the best stories, or I don't want to harass you. I feel like you'll call me if you're interested. How important is it, to follow up, or what's too much? What is a good public relations, journalist relationship?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There are definitely people who do too much. And I think part of it is less about how often they're contacting you, and really sort of the fact that they make the ribbon cutting of an apartment building, which is important to communities, but they make that as important as the Swaji exclusive, and I've done both, and I love doing both. But when you're pressing me out to the level for the ribbon cutting that you are about, the job is on me to treat it like the same way, not you. Okay. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to devalue the ribbon cutting. It is super important, but it's my job for me to treat it with the same weight. I think when you're pressing me out about those things 24/7, for me, then sort of I'm like, oh, so and so is contacting me. I'm gonna get back to them later, and that's just me. I don't speak for everybody, but that's been my experience. And so, and I think I understand on a publicist side why you would treat every client the same. And so, but it's how I think it's how you then relay that information, knowing that everything is not quite with the same amount of urgency. Does that make sense? So yeah, because I also don't tell nobody how to do their job, but I think that it's really important to sort of understand how you're pressing a person out. There are people who, and I think what I really appreciate is when people just sort of send stuff to me as an FYI, knowing that I might not use it. I have people who will send me a picture oh, this was at this event. I'm probably not going to use it, but it's cool. It's great to know that it's happening, and I think as long as it's just an FYI and not like pressing me to publish it, that's one thing. It also does help me know that they're still with this organization, or they still have this client, or this client is still doing this great thing. Is important. And then sometimes I have it in my picture file for later. A perfect example of that. I don't think it's wrong to give the university name. Howard's PR is like really good, I think, at sort of keeping a balanced relationship where they're like, they just send you the information, they're not pressing you out, but at the same time, they want, it'd be great if you do it. They do follow up sort of when it is the bigger things, like when Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, came, like, I got a follow-up email, like, you didn't reply to this, make sure you know this. And I'm like, oh, shoot, this is a huge deal. I got to be there for that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, going back to my example with this, is they had sent me a list that Howard had been named, I had gotten like 12 nominations for the HBCU Awards, and which is like, it's great. We know Howard's a great school, but it wasn't like pressing news at the moment when they sent it to me. But the awards aren't until August 2nd. Mm-hmm. So I needed a story, I needed something great, and the picture they sent was really beautiful, like 3 weeks after they sent the press release. And it's still news, it's still important, it's still really great to the Black community. Obviously, and particularly because with my job, I really try to stay hyper-local. So it's great to Washington, D.C., obviously. Mm-hmm. And it made, we got so much feedback from, it was, I think, the front section 2 weeks ago, and I got so many people reaching out just saying, like, that was a beautiful picture. That picture was courtesy. And it's a courtesy photo. It was courtesy of Howard University. But it was great news. It was empowering. It was a beautiful photo of the president walking with students, having these beautiful, bright black faces on the front. It was great. Mm-hmm. But that came from them not pressing me out, but it was news that I remembered. I filed back for the picture and the information weeks before that had been sent to me.
That's amazing. Wow. I have a million questions, but can you tell us the different roles in the newsroom and how important it is for someone like me to target the appropriate individual? Like, what is a managing editor versus an editor-in-chief or a deputy editor?
Mm-hmm. So, I think it works differently sometimes at different magazines, right? Or even, certain newsrooms like the Post and the New York Times even have like sort of different, even though they're on the same caliber and whatever. So I'll speak on behalf of the AFRO. The AFRO has a managing editor, which is sort of like the editor-in-chief. They ensure that everything is done. They read all of the stories in every section and edit it. And I've had 3 different managing editors in my time here, all who have been wonderful but different. And so, like, some have been, send every story to me before they go on the page. So, my current editor, we put everything in a folder and she gets to it, or just, reads it on the page. And, it works differently, but they are the person who sort of ensures the operation of the paper, as well as they become the bosses of the different editors per section, and they shake things up. My current managing editor, Tiffany Kinyard, who's fabulous, and she's also young and also is a teacher, and I think both of us have that in common. And so I've seen it really beneficial in my work as a journalist, and particularly as an editor in terms of delegating, things like that. And she's really great at that. But she's made it where it's like, she's like, we're all the managing editors. We all have to have our eyes on every single section of the paper. At least take a look, read it. You have to know. You're going to catch something that I don't because I'm reading 45 articles, and you're going to catch something that I just don't. And so that's been really helpful. So, this is the AFRO newsroom, managing editor, and then we have a Baltimore editor and a DC editor. So the Baltimore editor is really in charge of his section, and then he is another broadcast guy. He does radio, so he's like on podcasts and things like that, and really sort of helped on the digital platform and the radio side. And then DC editor is me, which really means like DC editor, PG editor, and sort of digital media editor, because I came in most interested in digital, but got offered the DC prestigious job, and so it has allowed for me to assign stories to people who are reporting in DC and Prince George's County, sort of the DMV. I try to include Montgomery and Northern Virginia when I can, but really we focus on DC and Prince George's County the most. And under me, in sort of my email list is about 30 freelance writers. I use on a regular basis probably about 5 of them. And that, again, like I said earlier, we changed. We went through a time of having just staff writers and freelancers as needed, which happens, it was only about 3 or 4 months. But those other freelancers then found other places to freelance on a regular basis, and so they send stuff when they can and things like that. But for me, it's also been helpful to have sort of a core group of freelancers who I know will do something, who I know I can reach out to and have good work. And it's allowed me to build relationships with those freelancers. I do not know all 30 people. I can call them and they'll know who I am, and they have my number saved. But if I saw them walking on the street, I'm not sure I'd know all of them. But I know at least about 15 of them I could recognize on the street. And the core 5, I'm texting on a regular basis. And I'd say the same happens in the Baltimore office. And then we also are in charge of photographers. Now, this is a tricky thing because we have a smaller organization, but we require our reporters to also have at least some level of photography skill to have photos that they can take when they report. But we also have photographers who can team up with our reporters. And our photographers also really focus on what we call now our lifestyle section, which are pictures of people doing things in the city. Normally at like red carpets and things like that, but sometimes we like to do variety where it might be a street fair or like during the snowstorm, maybe just people like shoveling. For Father's Day, I just had people submit photos of them and their kids. So we do switch up our lifestyle section, but yeah, our newsroom consists of managing editor, Baltimore DC editor, freelance photographers, and reporters.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that's just editorials. Oh, excuse me, and I forgot the biggest. Also on the editorial side is our production team. So production includes the people who do the layout of the paper itself, as well as our web editor, who is great and makes sure that all the articles online, all the video links work, all of the, my phone is going off, guys, sorry, but all the video links work, everything is set in stone. So all of those people are so important to the editorial team. So yeah, production, managing editor, Baltimore or local editors, reporters, photographers. And then we also have people who do advertising. People don't realize how much ads are so important in the newsroom. Again, this is because of my journalism ethics. I hate really working with advertisers because I don't want them to think that I'm doing a story based off the fact that we're getting ads from them. I don't like that. But, if you want to reach out to me, I will put you in contact with our advertising team. And I really am open to that and know how important our advertising team is in making sure that we are still a paper. So they're really important. And we have all of our administrative staff that are there. And we have a lot of editorial support staff, so people who, are sometimes just working on captions, and our interns, and people who, the Afro does a lot of events, and so we have someone who plans a lot of the events, but she also really does support us sort of as needed in everything. So our newsroom is fun. I'm only in our headquarters newsroom on Wednesdays, which is in Baltimore.
Okay.
And it's never a dull moment. I shoot a show at about 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, which is our publishing day. So it's crazy, you hear people, and we shoot it right in the newsroom, which is very purposeful, so people see that the Afro is not just 1 or 2 or 3 people. It is a family that is working hard to create a print and digital publication that we're very proud of. And so, we shoot it in the newsroom, and it is alive and living color. There are people moving around and yelling and printing and all of that.
That excites me.
And it's super exciting. I love every moment of it.
Absolutely. You keep talking about the digital aspect, and that's really where your love lied in the beginning. How important would you say we live in the digital world? Like, is print dead? I mean, you still have an actual print paper. How are people still reading? Are they still engaged in print papers? Do they still respect print?
So, this is a conversation we have at least 7 days a week.
Wow.
No, really, in some shape or form, I'm talking about this either with our team, with other people. But again, I'm going to speak on the Afro side and then try to make it more general. The Afro's been around 127 years, so we have people who still know the paper and pick it up and are mad if they don't have their paper by Saturday. We're a weekly publication, so we hit the stands on Thursdays, and if it's not in so-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so's mailbox or in their hand by Saturday, they are mad, and so because we have such an institution, we have that readership. Yes, it's dwindled, and some of those people who have been with us since the beginning, of course, are no longer with us, or who saw it in their households are not necessarily making it important to have it in their households. And so what I will say is that, one, the way to perpetuate the print paper is to make it a staple in your life, whatever that may be, whether it's you take it, if you're a metro commuter, you take it with you, and your kids or the people around you see you reading a paper.
Yeah.
If you get it delivered to your home, even if it's, even with the papers that are dailies, even if it's once a week, because that's part of the reason print has become so expensive. The Afro's only $2 per paper. It's only a weekly publication, so subscribe. But part of it is making sure it becomes a staple in your life, being intentional about it, and knowing that there is nothing like that tactile print. And for me, and I loved this before I even got into journalism, is there's always mistakes in the print paper. It is what it is. We really work to not have any, but even if it's something like period out of place or whatever, you catch it. I'm not saying there's always something in the DC section. No, I'm joking, but there's always something. And so even if it's fun, if you want to make a game out of it and catch that error, you know what I mean? Or maybe there's nothing, but and then that's even beautiful too. And so you know that you have a reliable piece of journalism coming at you. But I think that there's nothing better than that tactile paper. We really make a point of having a relationship with other staple institutions in the area to make sure that our paper is there and represented or nearby. We have a newsstand on U Street, and in the 7-Eleven on U Street you can find recent Afros in that CVS. We're at Shoppers and Giants and places where we know our people are going to be and can pick up their paper. So that's one thing. I also think it's really important to make sure that print, the way that print does not fully die, is to make sure it's in the schools, and that means from elementary on to the university and doctoral level, is making sure that they're there. We just had an Afro reception, and where we talked to some of the newsroom shakers in the area who talked about having it and making sure in Black student unions it's there, because often you'll see other papers around campus, but not one focused specifically to the Black community. But the real reason why print is so important and has to stay at least a factor, even if you're producing less, is that out of sight, out of mind is a real thing. When was the last time some of you all picked up Ebony or Jet? realistically.
And is it true that they're going out of? I heard that they just
fired their whole staff. Ebony did, or not fired, excuse me, laid off their whole staff. And Jet, I used to love being online with my mom over it in the grocery store, but I would always look at the Jet video.
Hello, right?
Like, oh, she's cute, or I want my hair like her, or like those, as a little kid, But that was something to do. And that I don't go on Jet.com anymore. Not that I'm not interested, but it's just an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. They're not as active when I'm looking at my feed on social media. And the Afro, could be that if we take them off the newsstands. We have a huge following on Facebook. We have a pretty nice following on Instagram and Twitter. But if people don't have that print copy, it's so easy to forget about you. And so that's why I know the Afro is going to keep on newsstands. That's why we're going to stay on newsstands. We're on Apple News. I think the only Black newspaper, actual print paper to be on Apple News. Of course, I love the Root. I read the Root, but they're Black, but they're digital for the most part. And I think I see them often on Apple News and things like that. But I really commend the Afro for making sure that they stay live in both areas and both arenas. We're going to keep that print paper. We're not going to let people forget about us. We're not going to, let people walk past their newsstand at their local grocery store and not be there, because it will truly be out of sight, out of mind.
I'm so glad that you said that. So it's up to us.
It's up to us.
And I like that you guys are, making sure that you're keeping, in front of everyone's eye.
Yeah, you have to. It's so important. And I think the other part of it, when we say it's up to us, is making sure that we get other people to go to those newsstands to pick up the physical paper. One thing, I don't have kids, but if and when I am blessed to do, I'll make sure that my kids read the paper and do fun things with it. One thing that my managing editor does, she homeschools her kids, and again, like I said, she's a teacher. She makes sure that they cut out headlines and things like that to remember. A friend of mine a few months ago sent me the paper from 2008, the Afro from 2008, when Obama was elected. They still have that in their house.
I still have the Washington Post.
I still have the Post too. I still have the Post from that day. My parents made sure it was important because I had a family that was into it.
My 18th birthday, my dad.
Yes,
had the paper.
You had the paper from your
birthday.
18th birthday, same for my 21st.
That is giving me chills.
Yes, me too. That you have to, and even what my grandmother used to do, which I used to always love, is I've gone back in albums, and she'll even cut out the dates from when so-and-so was born and what was in the news that day. Yeah, just really making sure. It's so important to make sure the newspaper remains a staple in your life, and telling the people around you. And people mimic what you're doing if they like what you're doing, people think it is cool when they see a cool person reading the paper. Yeah. And I think that's what you have to do it with it. For those that are watching, the Afro has a really cool campaign going on right now where if you take the I don't even remember the name of it. I've been saying Pack Your Afro, so we're calling it Pack Your Afro today. But basically, you take your Afro with you, and you are seen reading wherever you are. That's and the person who has the most likes or something gets a trip to Cancun.
Stop.
So yeah, I'm ready to flex with my Afro because employees are allowed. So the competition is on, y'all. Take that Afro with you and get that trip to Cancun. Cool. And again, we're doing it to bring more visibility to the publication, but at the same time, our executive director took it to the Dead Sea, and so to have known that someone saw her reading it there, and now somewhere all on the other side of the world saw the Afro. That's amazing. I think it's just as big with any paper and particularly these local papers, Washington City paper, Washington Informer, all of these other local papers that still have physical papers are really important. It's not just the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal and New York Times. They're great, and those are who we admire and stand on. But there's a lot of local people making the difference that we have. Baltimore Sun, like those people, I look for those physical papers because I know I'm going to have reliable news and interesting news and see a picture of a friend of mine or whatever. And that's to me just as important.
Yeah. Even to me, the traditional press clipping, like that excites me. It's great to have a link, and yes, I can screenshot and print the page, but it's nothing like saying, go grab 5 copies, you're in the paper.
Exactly.
Like, do people even clip, do press clippings anymore? I don't even know.
I think they do. I get emails a lot from people saying, where can I pick up the paper? Or people, calling me, texting me, asking me. So I think that's still a thing. Particularly for people who are either marketing themselves or marketing on behalf of other people. They want that press clipping. But, I think it should be it even when it's not somebody there. It should be just as important. And like I said, at least with the Afro, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see a name of somebody because one thing that I have really tried to do is remain hyper local. People, we again, because news is everywhere, we get it in so many shapes and forms, is that, if we're doing a piece, for example, on the Democratic debates that just happened, we want sort of a local spin on that, because we see articles on the debates everywhere. With immigration, we just did a piece on an organization here who, it's a national organization, but they're based here, that are speaking. It's National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Alliance. I think I got that. But they are working on behalf of advocating for immigrants, and so that's like a very hyper-local and hyper-black spin to what's happening with the U.S. border crisis, which is a crisis, but how do we focus on it in a hyper-local way? That's what I'm most interested in. That won't always be what my job is. I'm from DC, so to be able to tell hyper-local stories is really a privilege.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for your time. I definitely don't want to keep you too long because I know that you have a crazy schedule.
It's a busy day, but I so appreciate this time. It's allowed me to reflect on why I do this every day. But I also just think it's so important what you're doing in educating your world about journalism, because you work in it and do it, but not everyone like you has the background in it. And so I think it's just so important to meet the media.
Absolutely, to see the faces behind these stories that we read every day. Like that's cool to me. So I know that you can't really talk about your typical day, but today, for example, you said how you're off to Atlanta later. Can you tell us what is every day like for an editor?
Yes. So it really means like being. I work out every day, so I wake up early to do that normally. Either way, I haven't done such a day. But
how do you do that?
Yeah,
how do you find the time?
I have to, because stress is a real thing, and I am not blessed with the ability to manifest stress in a way, and I gain weight, I break out, I do all that when I'm stressed. There's a lot of people who lose 20 pounds just because they have 20 emails. I don't know those people. That's not me. And so I have to do it to, one, get those endorphins. Even if I'm not losing a pound, it is just for the sake of getting my body moving and getting those chemicals in my body to tell me that everything's going to be okay and I can conquer the day. So that is one reason why I make sure that I work out throughout at some point in my day, because I do have such a busy schedule. But my day really starts with immediately checking the news, what's going on, what are some of the breaking stories of the day, is checking to see if my reporters have my deadline, because that's a real thing. And then often throughout the day I'll have meetings. I don't write as much as I used to when I wasn't an editor, but I still do about 2 to 3 stories a week, and so generally that would include me interviewing somebody, and a lot of editing. I mean, once my reporters have turned in the stories, I start editing, and particularly because if they need some work before actual deadline day and publishing day, then I can give it to them in some time to do whatever they need to do or get that extra quote. But also just makes my job easier once it's done and out the way and out of my inbox. I can